Bon Scott was ACDC's original wild child. He lived fast, sang louder, and made sure every lyric hit like a punch to the gut. But what if I told you there were songs, big songs, that he didn't think were worth the hype? Songs you've probably cranked up in your car that Bon might have rolled his eyes at? Yeah, that's what we're diving into today. And stick around till the end, because the last song on this list, it's one that fans worship, but Bon once said it felt like a pub rock leftover. Trust me, you're gonna want to hear that. Let's get into it. 10. Big Gun. Okay, first off, yes, Big Gun technically dropped after Bon's death. It was recorded with Brian Johnson for the Last Action Hero soundtrack in 1993. But here's the kicker. The original riff dates back to jam sessions Bon was part of in the late 70s. According to Angus Young, Bon called the early version loud, lazy, and way too American. He didn't like the direction it was headed and said it lacked ACDC's signature grit. He wasn't into big cinematic rock. He wanted street-level swagger. 9. Night Prowler. This one's controversial. Night Prowler is one of the darkest tracks on Highway to Hell, and Bon co-wrote it. But close friends say he was never satisfied with how it turned out. He allegedly told his mate Silver Smith, "It sounds like it's trying to be creepy, but ends up just dragging." Bon wanted it to feel like a back-alley confession, but the studio production smoothed over its edges. When the Richard Ramirez controversy exploded years later, he wasn't there to defend it. But even before then, Bon was reportedly over it. 8. Touch Too Much. Now, this one hurts. Touch Too Much is a fan favorite. Sleek, sexy, full of swagger. But Bon wasn't impressed. In a taped interview with a French magazine weeks before his death, Bon laughed when asked about the track and said, "That one sounds like a pop song wearing leather pants." He wanted grit, not gloss. And Highway to Hell had a lot more polish thanks to producer Mutt Lange, something Bon had mixed feelings about. 7. Love at First Feel. Bon didn't hate it, but he didn't love it either. Love at First Feel was one of those filler tracks he thought got more attention than it deserved. He described it once as a lazy lyric over a recycled riff. It was meant to capture that one-night stand energy, but Bon felt the band had done it better on other tracks. He believed it sounded more like a warm-up jam than a finished product. 6. Girls Got Rhythm. Here's one that'll surprise you. Girls Got Rhythm is pure ACDC, punchy, cheeky, and loud. But Bon called it a radio hit in rock clothing. He thought it lacked the punch of earlier singles like Whole Lotta Rosie. The band was clearly aiming for something that could break into the American market, and Bon wasn't totally on board with that strategy. He wanted raw pub rock, not billboard polish. 5. Beating Around the Bush. Another shocker. The track is fast, mean, and bluesy, a Bon Scott specialty. But in private, he said the lyrics were too forced, like trying to squeeze attitude out of a sponge. He reportedly told Malcolm during rehearsals. He didn't like how the innuendo turned into tongue twisters. Bon loved double entendres, but he liked them sharp and cheeky, not clunky. Now, before we move into the next chapter, let's pause for a second. Why would Bon criticize these songs if he helped write them? Simple. He held ACDC to an insanely high standard. Bon wasn't just a frontman. He was a lyricist, a poet in denim, and a walking contradiction. He could sing about bar fights and broken hearts in the same breath. And when the music didn't match his raw vision, he wasn't afraid to say it. That's what makes this list fascinating. It's not about disowning the band's catalog. It's about understanding Bon's uncompromising taste. He didn't want good. He wanted dangerous. And when songs felt safe or formulaic, he tuned out. Coming up in Chapter 2, Bon's beef with a song that became a staple in every ACDC setlist, and the time he nearly walked out of a rehearsal because of it. We're only halfway through this list, and trust me, it only gets wilder. Let's pick up where we left off. Bon Scott wasn't just the soul of ACDC, he was its barometer for authenticity. And as the band inched closer to global fame, Bon started sensing something. A subtle shift away from the raw, rebellious sound he loved. He didn't just keep those thoughts to himself either. He voiced them, bluntly, often with a pint in hand. So let's dive into the next 5 songs Bon thought were overrated, and one in particular that nearly made him quit a rehearsal. 4. Shot Down in Flames. This one's tricky. Fans love Shot Down in Flames for its energy and blunt lyrics. But Bon? He once told a roadie backstage that one feels like we're trying to copy ourselves. He felt the song was built on cliches, both musically and lyrically. Bon's writing often had a layer of sly self-awareness. But with Shot Down in Flames, he thought it leaned too heavily into caricature. He reportedly hated how predictable it felt, saying it was paint-by-numbers rock. And here's the kicker. It was still included in almost every setlist during the Highway to Hell tour, which frustrated him even more. According to those close to him, he preferred deeper cuts or raw blues tracks, but management pushed the hits, and this was one they wouldn't budge on. 3. Rocker. Live versions. Now Rocker started off as a gem. Fast, reckless, pure adrenaline. Bon loved the original studio version. But as it became a staple of the band's live set, it ballooned into something else. Extended solos, repetitive breakdowns. Sometimes the song would stretch over 10 minutes. Bon, who had a deep love for tight storytelling and pacing, grew tired of it. During the Let There Be Rock tour, he reportedly said, "I'm not James Brown. We don't need to drag it out like some Vegas act." He wanted short, sharp, and brutal, not drawn-out theatrics. By the end of 1978, he was openly suggesting it be rotated out of the setlist. Of course, it wasn't. 2. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Now, this will raise some eyebrows. How could Bon Scott, who practically is this song, not love it? Well, he did at first, but over time, he grew critical of how people interpreted it. He once said, "It was meant to be a warning, not a damn anthem." The bagpipes were his idea, sure, but even those became a regret later on. The song became a kind of theme tune, one Bon felt boxed him in. "People shout the chorus and miss the point," he told an Australian radio host in a rare interview. "They treat it like a victory lap. It's not. It's a funeral march." His frustration wasn't about the music. It was about the message getting lost. To him, it was a deeply cynical song, and hearing it turned into a celebratory chant left a bitter taste in his mouth. 1. High Voltage. Let's talk about one of the band's most iconic early songs, High Voltage. It has all the ACDC ingredients, booming riffs, cheeky lyrics, and that signature strut. But Bon, surprisingly, thought it was overhyped. He once called it rock by numbers, in a moment of brutal honesty with a fan after a show in Perth. High Voltage was designed to be a mission statement, ACDC's declaration to the world. But Bon thought it didn't have enough bite. "It's like we put a leather jacket on a mannequin," he joked. For him, it lacked the dangerous energy of tracks like Problem Child or Down Payment Blues. And here's the wild part. He was once caught on tape mocking it during a rehearsal, swapping out the chorus with nonsense lyrics just to make the band laugh. It didn't go down well with everyone, but it showed Bon's cheeky resistance to play along with what he saw as empty branding. Here's the moment you've been waiting for. In 1979, during a warm-up session for their European tour, the band was rehearsing If You Want Blood, You've Got It. On paper, it sounds like a Bon Scott classic, violent, wild, and explosive. But Bon wasn't happy. He reportedly stopped mid-rehearsal, slammed down his mic, and said, "This feels like we're doing a parody of ourselves." Angus laughed it off. Malcolm didn't. Tension spiked. Bon felt the lyrics leaned too far into violence for the sake of violence. He liked danger, sure, but he wanted it to feel real. When asked later about the incident, bassist Cliff Williams said, "Bon just thought we were losing the plot a bit." Eventually, he agreed to keep it in the setlist, but the frustration lingered. This wasn't about one song. It was about direction. Bon feared ACDC was drifting from its roots, becoming a brand instead of a band. And that tension followed him until the very end. When Bon died in 1980, the band was on the brink of superstardom. Highway to Hell was huge, and Back in Black would become even bigger. But Bon didn't live to see it. He left behind a legacy and a quiet list of songs he thought didn't measure up to what ACDC could be. In Chapter 3, we'll dive into how the band responded after his death. Did they honor his taste, or double down on the sound he grew to resent? And we'll also reveal the bonus 11th song, one that's a fan favorite today, but Bon reportedly once said should have stayed in the garage. After Bon Scott's tragic death in February 1980, ACDC didn't just survive, they exploded. Back in Black, written and recorded with new singer Brian Johnson, became one of the best-selling rock albums of all time. But as the band surged ahead, Bon's ghost loomed large, not just in the lyrics he left behind, but in the sound he helped define, and the compromises he couldn't stand. So now we ask, did ACDC carry forward Bon's vision, or did they double down on the very things he warned against? Let's finish this list with one last track, a bonus entry that Bon was especially vocal about, plus a final look at how his standards shaped and haunted the band forever. This song is iconic. Dirty lyrics, sludgy guitars. It screams classic ACDC. What? But Bon, he wasn't sold. He loved the concept, murder for hire. Sleazy phone calls, cartoon villainy. That was all his idea. But the final product, he didn't think it hit hard enough. He once told Angus, "It's a great title with a half-cooked punch." He thought the delivery should have been darker, nastier, less tongue-in-cheek. In early demos, the song had a heavier, almost doom-like feel. But it got cleaned up in the studio, and Bon wasn't thrilled with the result. The song became a radio hit in the US, ironically, years after his death. But to Bon, it felt like a watered-down version of what he had envisioned. And yet, fans adored it. To this day, it's a staple at every show. That was always the tension with Bon. What the world loved wasn't always what he loved. Here's the truth. Bon Scott wasn't just judging ACDC's songs. He judged everything. The production, the lyrics, the performances, the motives. He held himself to the same brutal standards. That's why he often clashed with producers, even while writing hits. Take the Highway to Hell sessions. Mutt Lange came in with a mission: clean up the sound, get it radio ready, and launch ACDC into mainstream rock. He succeeded. But Bon hated the sterile feel of the studio. He told a friend, "We're bottling lightning, and it's going flat." Bon preferred the chaos of live shows, sweaty clubs, and writing lyrics at 3 a.m. in the back of a van. When the band started getting too polished, too calculated, he pulled back. That's why so many of these overrated songs have one thing in common. They felt too safe. He wasn't against success. He just didn't want to sound like they were trying too hard to chase it. Here's where it gets complicated. With Bon gone, ACDC had two choices: retreat or evolve. They chose to evolve, but they didn't do it by reinventing themselves. Instead, they streamlined. They leaned into the sound Bon had helped build, but stripped out the unpredictability. Back in Black was massive, but even fans noticed the shift. Bon's lyrics were wild, ironic, sometimes even poetic. Brian Johnson's lyrics? Simpler, more blunt. The music became tighter, cleaner, and in many ways, more commercial. Bon might have hated that. Or maybe he would have embraced it. We'll never know. But what we do know is this: the songs he once thought were filler, predictable, or too polished are now sacred to millions. And that says something powerful. When Bon called a song overrated, it wasn't because it wasn't popular. It was because he felt it wasn't real. Not real enough, not raw enough, not ACDC enough. He believed rock wasn't supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be dangerous. That's why so many of his complaints weren't about the riffs or the hooks, but the intent. He could smell it when something was designed for radio play instead of bar fights, and he hated it. Some of the songs on this list became huge without him. Some were misunderstood. Some became classics. But all of them, in Bon's mind, came up short of the wild, unpredictable, rebellious fire he lived for. When Bon died, ACDC didn't just lose a frontman. They lost a quality check. A bullshit detector. A guy who would laugh at your riff if it didn't swing hard enough. A poet who loved Chuck Berry as much as Charles Bukowski. That's why this list isn't just a bunch of hot takes. It's a window into what Bon thought rock and roll should be. Loud, sure. Fast, absolutely. But above all, honest. So the next time you hear "Girls Got Rhythm" or "High Voltage," ask yourself, does it sound dangerous or does it sound clean? Bon knew the difference.